Hello, welcome to the channel. Today I wanted to talk about healing from really big wounds. I know this time of year right now, so many of you might be having these huge wounds coming to the surface that maybe you never thought you'd have to deal with, or just these old traumatic memories coming up that maybe you had tried to forget all about or deny its existence altogether. And perhaps it was just too much for you to emotionally digest and process when you were a child or even a young adult. And so you just blocked it out because that was really the only way you knew how to deal with it. And now, because there's so much more light coming into us and awakening from within us, all of these darker, traumas that happened, I don't even want to say darker, I just want to say more painful traumas that happened to us. We might be seeing them for the first time quite unexpectedly. I know that this has happened in my own life, something that happened when I was very young, and I tried to bury it and repress it and suppress it the best I could, but it has just come up to the surface for me to see, and I know it's because there's so much light here now, that there's enough love here for this wound to be seen, to be integrated, to really be healed. So that might be happening for you guys. You might just be getting blindsided by oh wow, I had forgotten all about that trauma, that wound, that whatever it is, that painful memory. And now it's here. And the thing is, a lot of these wounds, they can have so much shame tied up in them. They can have so much fear embedded in them, anger, regret, all of these things. There's all these difficult emotions and feelings that often come with these wounds, which is why we initially, when we were younger, pushed them away, just locked them away in a dungeon and threw the key, just pretended like they didn't happen and just moved on with life as if, nothing had happened at all. So I know it's really hard to go through this process, but the one thing I want to say, that this is such a gift for all of us, if you are processing a really old, deep, painful memory or wound or traumatic experience, is that now that memory, those energies, the shame, the trauma, the pain, it gets to come up and out of your body now. You get to literally, just by being willing to see it and feel it, you literally allow the light to dissolve it. You allow God to heal this wound for you, so that this wound, you could say, it releases from your body or just integrates into the light. And these wounds they're in our body. They store in our body. And so the beautiful thing is, once we start to heal these wounds, they no longer impact our life in the way they used to. We no longer behave in maybe trauma response ways that we used to, like addiction behavior, avoidance behavior, rejecting ourselves, self-defeating thoughts. A lot of even self-sabotage. A lot of self-sabotage comes from unhealed wounds from our youth, or even from a past lifetime. It doesn't even have to be something that you can logically connect to this lifetime or remember from this lifetime. It can just be this feeling of maybe it's deep, deep, deep heartbreak, a deep, deep, deep wound in your heart that you can't identify in this life. It could be from a past life. But the thing is, you now have enough consciousness, enough light, enough awareness to allow this wound to heal. And so now, as you move through life, as you're healing this wound and as it begins to integrate, you're going to move through life as a more confident person, as a more self-sufficient person, as a less needy person. You're not going to have so many codependent tendencies. You're going to start it's going to be easier for you to follow your heart. You're not going to have really as much shame about doing what you really love. Self-care and compassion will just be natural for you. Whereas when we have the trauma in our body of these old wounds, a lot of times we have this feeling of unworthiness or guilt or shame around taking care of ourselves, around, self-love and compassion, around just being and doing, being who we want to be and doing what we want to do. So this is a really amazing opportunity, as difficult as these wounds can be to see and to feel, and maybe when we have to relive them in a sense, if like, just what I mean by that is re-feeling the shame we felt back then that we shoved away, that we didn't have the emotional capacity or intelligence to feel. I know it's hard to let that shame come back up, or for me it's been a lot of shame lately, so I'll just speak to that, and fear. And that shame, it can have a nausea to it. It can have like, ugh, like you're tasting a dead rat. I mean, it can just be really, really gnarly stuff to feel. And like vibrationally, shame is just above death. It's really the lowest vibration there is. So while it is extremely hard to feel and extremely hard to purge, it's incredible because it's like you're taking this dense brick out of your body, and you're just going to feel so much lighter, so much more expansive, so much more connected to source, to who you really are, to your gifts, to your power. And one of the things I've been doing is to work with the one who is feeling shame. Maybe for you it's like back when you were 5, something happened and you've just felt so ashamed of it ever since, or 10, or however, maybe it was 20, whatever age. And there was just so much shame, and it was just too much shame for you to feel in that moment, so you just buried it and you just pushed it away and you repressed it. And you really just you basically denied that aspect of yourself. What happened is that part of yourself, it becomes fragmented. And so when we push a part of ourselves away in that moment, it never comes back into wholeness until we are open to embracing it and being there for the one who feels ashamed. Being there for, we'll just say, that 5-year-old who feels ashamed. And one of the things I've been doing is, for my inner child, is just telling him, you can feel as much shame in this body as you need to. You can feel as much fear in this body as you need to. And just bringing this real unconditional love to the one that feels so ashamed, that feels embarrassed, that feels guilty. You know, shame has this feeling of, I am a mistake. And I've been feeling that there's this wounded inner child in here that's been feeling like, I am a mistake, based on maybe what it did and how it perceives itself through what happened. And I've just been really breathing into this one, you know, I love you, and then exhaling, it's okay. You know, I love you, it's okay. And what I've been noticing, the more I do this with any type of pain or trauma, it doesn't even have to be, you know, a deeply buried wound that's just coming up. This could be with any type of uncomfortable feeling in the body. What I've noticed is I'm breathing into this feeling, I love you, and exhaling, it's okay. It's less about now, for me, trying to transmute this pain into like the light, or trying to transmute this pain into a better feeling. Or it's less about trying to transform, you know, the shame into something different. It's really just become, for me, I've just started to fall so deeply in love with the process of loving my pain, of loving my wounded inner child. I'm just in love with loving the part of me that hurts. And there's no agenda with it. There's no other motive than that, you know? There's no underlying energy of, I'm just feeling you so that, you know, eventually you'll heal and I'll feel better. You know, I won't have to feel this feeling anymore. And I'm not saying there's not a little bit of that left. I'm sure there is. But what I've noticed is that this just transforms the whole process of working with difficult emotions, working with painful memories, working with especially shame, fear, anger. Is, you know, I used to more open to these feelings because I knew, like, okay, on the other side of anger, there's power. On the other side of fear, there's excitement, you know? On the other side of depression, there's joy. And so I would kind of like, you know, entice myself, you could say, to let myself feel these feelings because I knew there was a payoff, there was a reward at the end of it. Whereas now it's just, you know, I'm just feeling this feeling because I'm in love I'm really in love with the wounded inner child. I'm in love with the one who's hurting. And this is so beautiful because I feel like this is when things can really shift, because now there's no resistance at all to it. And it's like that saying, until you can love something, it still has something to teach you. So earlier in my process, while I was doing a good job of opening to feelings and difficult emotions and pain, I don't know if I was totally in love with the pain yet. I don't know if I was genuinely in love with the trauma or whatever difficult emotion was arising. Whereas now I'm really starting to feel, as I breathe into the pain, I love you, and I exhale, it's okay. I'm really starting to feel this unconditional love start birthing within me. This unconditional love that loves everything, that loves the pain, that loves the joy, that loves despair. That this unconditional love that sees despair is so worthy of attention and embrace. That sees shame as such a beautiful, divine feeling that is worthy of all the love, of all the light that I can possibly bring to it. That I can, basically what I'm trying to say is, it's just this movement of falling in love with loving difficult feelings and emotions. And I think this is something that takes time. This is another movement that I feel has been a huge byproduct of just the grace of my teachers and sitting with them. With one of my teachers, because this hugely deeply buried inner wound came up, I was sitting with her and I was telling her, I was saying what happened, the memory, I was saying it to her. And as I was saying the memory to her, there was so much shame coming out of me. I mean, I couldn't even look at her, I was just doing this and just crying because there was this, I was basically allowing myself to be that wounded inner child and I was allowing him to speak to her. And there was all of this shame. And I even looked up at her and I just saw her loving me so thoroughly. She was just radiating with love and presence. And what that did is it taught that wounded inner child who was so filled with shame and despair and guilt and fear and all of these darker, I won't even say darker, but these difficult emotions. It just allowed that inner child to see, oh, I'm still loved. I'm still worthy of love. Even though this happened, even though I did this thing that I've been ashamed about my whole life, And that was so powerfully transformative for me to know, or I should say that wounded inner child, it had that direct experience of, oh my gosh, I am still so loved. And and that's what I mean by the grace of a teacher is when. And this is the beautiful thing about having a spiritual teacher that I've found is that just having this loving presence when we are sharing maybe the things we never felt like we could share with anybody. This one, the thing that happened with me is something that I probably only share with her. It's one of those things that I literally thought I would never talk about in this lifetime. And I think maybe March and this ascension journey, and as our consciousness rises, that these are going to be themes of things we never thought we'd have to deal with or confront, address, and heal or see, starting to come to the surface in powerful ways. And at first when this wound came to the surface for me, it felt this big in my consciousness. It felt overwhelming. I had this feeling of there's no way I'm ever going to heal this. And it's not us that heal it, right? God heals it for us. The universe heals it for us. But I felt, as the human down on earth, this emotion, this feeling felt too immense, too big. And I immediately saw why I was fragmenting that part of myself, pushing that part of myself away, why I was in such denial my entire life since the thing had happened. But right now, if these things are coming up for you, if a wound like this is coming up for you or a traumatic memory, it's because there's enough light here for it to heal. That's the only reason it would come up, because you have the capacity to see it now. You have the capacity to love it because there's enough unconditional love that is birthing within you to sit with this feeling, to be with this emotion, to find the help you need if you need help. I needed help with what was coming up for me. I just needed someone to sit there and love me as I let that 4-year-old or however old, 10-year-old, whatever, it could even be, like I said, a past life, but as you just let that wounded part of you speak, whatever it feels ashamed of or whatever it feels guilty about or depressed about, or whatever it's grieving about or afraid of, is you just let that part of you speak, and you just feel someone loving you. I feel like that's the most healing thing. At least for me, that was a very healing experience. And you know what's interesting is I see I'm 15 minutes into this video, and I was actually gonna talk about something else, but hey, we're here. I guess this is what wanted to come through. The last thing I want to end this video with is something I discovered today, that if we have a big wound and we are simultaneously giving our power away, it might take a long time for the wound to heal. But if we have a big wound and we are simultaneously recalling all of our power back from wherever we give our power away. I've been a very codependent, needy person for a vast majority of my life, which just means I externalize my power. I give other people my power. I give, my work my power. I have this habit, or I give someone I'm in a relationship all of my power. I just have this habit. And what I've noticed is the more I can recall all of the power that I tend to give away, the more I have the spiritual power to help me heal these big wounds. And so if that's the last point I want to leave you with. Notice where you give your power away, and then recall that power. We're all sovereign beings, so we can give our power away when we want to, and we can also bring it back into us when we need it back, when we want to have the experience of being in our power fully. And I feel like being in our power fully really helps with healing deep wounds, really helps with cultivating the power and the strength to sit with difficult emotions and memories. So I hope that this was helpful, guys. Remember, right now it's a beautiful thing if something heavy and difficult is coming up, because as Rumi said, the wound is where the light enters. So right now, it's just a sign that so much more light is waking up within you and is coming into you. And as this wound heals, it's like all of that shadow that was there, it just fills with light, and your vessel is you're just that much more radiant. Your heart is just that much more open, and you feel that much more connected to who you truly are. So I love you all very much. Namaste.